All right, we're back, and now we're talking about our affricates. And our affricates are best characterized as, again, a single phoneme, but they're sort of a combination phoneme, right? Because if you want to think about it as essentially a stop sound followed by the production of a fricative type production. Because you have complete closure of your articulator, and then you release it, and then you have that fricative type production. And in English, essentially, we only have one set of affricates. We have those palatal velar or post-alveolar affricates, our ch and our j. But let's hold on to that because I will talk a little bit about how in disordered speech we also have another type of affricate production, but we'll talk about that after we get through our approved English affricates, the palatal velar ch and j. Okay. All right, and my goodness, what else do I want to say about that? And I guess, all right, and so again, and sometimes it's hard to stop and think about our affricates because sometimes our affricates are considered to be single phonemes, right? A ch and a j are a single phoneme. It's sort of a combination of productions, but it is a single phoneme. But that is in contrast to those consonant clusters. I don't know, it's like this idea, a cluster of a TS. I don't consider a TS a cluster, or a T theta. I don't consider those to be clusters. I consider a cluster be like an SP in space or an ND in hand. I consider those to be clusters. We're just going to leave that. But anytime you have a combination of sounds, theoretically it's a cluster, but some clusters are considered to be more cluster-esque than others. But here, in our kids who have speech disorders, what often happens is they front their palatal velar or post-alveolar affricates. Instead of saying the ch in the j, what happens is they front them to an alveolar production of a ts and a z. So instead of saying church, they say tsuts. Or instead of saying judge, they say zuds. Okay? And so while those aren't necessarily English affricates, we hear these kids saying these sounds all the time. And you need to be able to hear those productions and be able to know that those are incorrect productions, they are not appropriate, and those are fronting productions that we need to work on pulling the tongue backwards, right? So those are our alveolar affricates, our ts and our z. Let's get those learned and imprinted in our brain, and we will classify those as alveolar affricates, okay? And we'll hear those as we go through our production practices and our listening practices in our labs, but let's just be introduced to them now. All right, so our English palatal velar affricates, the ch and the j. The ch, usually known as the sneeze sound or the train sound, I usually talk about as a train sound. The j, usually known as the jumping bean sound. Again, the ch, usually not one that we confuse. The j, sometimes students just make silly mistakes. J, usually in orthography, is represented by the J or the DG, but sometimes students do silly things when they're transcribing and transcribe with the J, which again is the yes sound. So let's just make sure we know where we're at. This tongue position is a little, I would put it a little bit further back. To me, this still looks like it's more at the alveolar ridge. It should be a little bit further back since it's a palatal velar affricate. But yes, palatal velar sound, beyond, behind that behind that alveolar ridge. All right, so let's look to see who are our ch words here. Again, even though the ch is usually our indication of ch words here, chef, nope, that's our esh. Our palatal velar fricative, hatchet, here's a ch, pitch. There's a ch, brochure, there's our esh, our fricative chord, that's a k, culture, there's a ch, ache, there's a k, machine, there's our esh, church. Again, there's one of our words where we have that post-alveolar affricate at the beginning and the end. Future. Again, there's a ch in the middle. And our j, let's look for j's. Garage. Again, depending on how you want to say it, but this I would say garage with an edge. One of our few words that has an edge. Our voiced palatal-alveolar fricative on the end. Budget. J. There's a j. Our voiced affricate on the end, or excuse me, in the middle. Ginger, we got 2. Dungeon, there's 1. Jump at the beginning. Education, there's 1 at the beginning. Gesture, 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 ch. There's a j and a ch, and so we got both affricates there. Voyage on the end. Engine, splurge on the end. We have a three element cluster and a j. So this is a nice, very complex word there. All right. So how do our affricates vary by context? All right. So in general, they vary a little bit less than our stops, but in general, since they are obstruents, they are similar. They do have longer vowels before the voiced affricate, before the j, so then before the voiceless ch. So again, we will have our word final voiced affricates. Our word final voiced affricates are j, often might have some partial devoicing. In a word like, will we say edge with a big j? Maybe not, but we're also not going to say etch. When we say I jumped off the edge, we're not going to say I jumped off the etch. So we're somewhere in between. So we might have some partial devoicing, but we're not going to have that full, the full devoicing, right? So, but again, in general, those obstruents vary with an a. They vary with an e very similarly across their contexts. Okay, so in general, our obstruents, they have cognate pairs, right? All of our obstruents have voiced and voiceless pairings. So all of them have cognate pairs. We have longer vowels before the voiced obstruents as compared to the voiceless obstruents. And those word final obstruents often have some partial devoicing, right? At the ends. They may not be fully devoiced, but there might be that partial devoicing. And here, just to sort of wrap up all of our obstruents, some final transcription practice. Again, head over to dictionary.com if you want. Looks like we've got we got a hodgepodge, that's a good word, isn't it? A hodgepodge of different kinds of obstruents here for you to practice transcribing, and even just saying them, just thinking about what phonemes you'd put in there. Just to practice that transcription so that you are ready to go and you can identify those phonemes. And we will come to sonorants next.